So my name is Dr. Holly Carling. I'm a doctor of Oriental Medicine, a licensed acupuncturist, a doctor of naturopathy, clinical nutritionist, and a master herbologist. And I'm owner of Vital Health here. And I've been in practice, see, next year will be 30 years, 40 years? 30, I think. Gotta think about that, how old am I? I've been in practice since 79 in nutrition, so how many years is that? That's 40 years, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, if you've not been to the class, there's a lot of you that are new here, there's people that have been here before, and a lot of you that are new. If you've not been in our class before, I like this to be an open, interactive kind of class. So feel free, if you have any questions, to ask your questions, because if you're having those questions, so are somebody else in the class. So I like it to be open, fun, let's just have fun tonight. This isn't always a fun topic though, because when you're suffering from hormonal issues, it can really, really affect your life. And what a lot of people don't realize is that hormonal imbalance can actually be dangerous. And messing with it too much can actually cause death. And it's not something to take lightly. So we need to be really sure about what we're doing and really be on top of things. Your hormones are your chemical messengers in the body. Your hormones tell the body how to respond to different things that are going on either in your environment, in stressful situations, and what you ate, and what kind of inflammation is going on. Hormones are giving messages to the body in a very complex way all the time. And it controls every single system in your body one way or another. And so hormonal balance is incredibly important. I'm going to come to this chart quite a bit tonight. This is a Harrower's chart if you've never seen one before. This is your major endocrine glands. So when I say endocrine system, hormonal system, it's interchangeable. Your endocrine system is all the organs or glands, mostly glands, that produce a hormone. And when you look at this chart, can you in the back of the room, can you see the lines that are connecting these? If you look at this is a complex biofeedback loop that occurs every time something happens. Everybody has to adjust. So if you eat sugar and you affect the pancreas, the pituitary is going to get affected, the liver is going to get affected, the thyroid is going to get affected, the duodenum is, the adrenal medulla is, the parathyroid is, just because of one thing. Everybody has to adapt, and because that got affected, now your mammary does. And this is your sex hormones here. Your energy is controlled right through here. Your sleep is controlled over here. Your immune system is controlled over here. Your digestion is through here. And one change in one thing changes the whole thing. So what happens if you take a hormone and now you've changed its function? Everybody else has to change as a result. For instance, very common if you've been on thyroid therapy to start having problems with blood sugar. And a lot of people end up with diabetes because one thing's being targeted. Okay? So what we're going to talk about tonight is what is normal, healthy hormonal function. What does that look like? What are the risks associated with hormone replacement? Why bioidentical hormones may not be the best choice? And if you choose to get off from them, how do you get off from them? It is not an easy thing to do. And so we really need to cover that, how to do that properly, and how to restore your own natural hormone producing capacity. So what we do at Vital Health is we are working like detectives, and we're looking at what went wrong in the first place. Okay? We're not supposed to plummet just because we reach a certain age. People are so used to, when you go through menopause, you have to have hot flashes. You're going to have sleep problems. You're going to have mood problems. You're going to have vaginal dryness. You're going to have all of these symptoms It's just, that's what happens. Huh?
It's like having terrible twos or terrible threes or 3-year-olds. It's
I
sad.
never thought about it that way. And irritability, you know, in reading all these things, irritability is a big deal with a lot of people here. Irritability, sleep, and abdominal pooch is what a lot of people had marked. Probably the majority of people in this classroom today had marked. So that's obviously a big deal. But why? These things are not normal. We have accepted the norm as normal. We've accepted PMS, for instance, as being normal. That's not normal, but it's the norm, and there's a difference. There's so many things that we accept that we have to live with that we shouldn't be having to live with. And so I want to kind of peel away that dynamic from the beginning. Just because you've aged doesn't mean you have to have certain things going on with your body. Okay? It might be more common, doesn't mean you have to do that. One of the things that we've learned in the last decade in the field of epigenetics is that we have more control over our genetic expression than we originally thought we did. Just because you have a genetic propensity for something, so, you know, because your mother had horrible hot flashes, doesn't mean you have to as well. And you guys in the room, there's only 2 of you, andropause, male menopause, is becoming a really big thing and a really serious thing too. Most people have never even heard of andropause, but it is going on with men. Their testosterone levels are dropping so low, their androgen levels are dropping so low. And how do you get ladies guess it manifests? Anybody want to guess how that manifests in a man? They're grouchy. They're grumpy old men.
A little yes. Us ladies have always known they've had menopause.
Yes. And some women, I had a brother-in-law when he was in his 20s that lived with me, and every month, like clockwork, that man, nobody could get along with. And it was like, oh my gosh. It was so evident in him. We finally are like, okay, we need to do some straightening out here. His brother was a chiropractor and I was an acupuncturist, and it's like, okay, it's time that we get to business here. But it happens even younger.
Stuff like that.
What's that?
How do you approach a man like that, especially if he's, I guess you have to wait for the grumpy wave to pass, but.
Well, yeah, you definitely don't want to approach it during the grumpy wave. But
That's delicate.
it's delicate how to approach them, because some are receptive to it and some, most men know when they're being grouchy and when they're being intolerant. But there's a supplement that we use called rhodiola ginseng, and it's been nicknamed the grumpy old man syndrome. So one approach that some patients have used is they're just, you know, saying you're always complaining about fatigue, and this helps with fatigue. So you want to give it a try, and they like it.
Go back to where they're.
So
What is
it has
it?
literally been nicknamed the grumpy old man pill.
What is it?
It's called rhodiola and ginseng.
Rhodiola?
It's by a certain company. It's a complex. Rhodiola is RHODIOLA. Rhodiola and ginseng, and that's our grumpy old man pill. If you guys could only see how many women are writing this down.
Well, there's a relation between the man's hormone balance and prostate cancer too, is there not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I would think they would be all want to know.
I agree, but doesn't mean that they do.
Oh. Okay.
So we're going to talk about male hormones a little bit today, and the hormone replacement that they're doing with testosterone and the testosterone gels, and what that does to men. And it's not as good as they think it is. I mean,
Well,
they feel great, huh?
They're giving it to women too.
Yes, and you know what? That is so important. There are a couple of doctors, there's about 3 doctors in this area between here and Spokane that are giving a lot of hormone replacement, and they are giving high doses. And I've seen women taking 3 times a normal male dose of testosterone. And it's really creating a lot of problems. I spend a lot of time trying to get people straightened out from hormone replacement. And as with everything, there's a time and a place where it's appropriate. There's one major problem with hormone replacement? What do you think it is?
Balance. The up and down cycle.
No, you feel good when you first go on it.
That's what I'm saying.
You feel like it's the magic pill. People that go on hormone replacement, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel better,
Yeah,
I
energy.
feel alive, I feel like I think I'm supposed to feel. Problem is, you don't always feel that way. And then you get on the roller coasters, and then finally it doesn't work anymore. And that's what happens. And I want to talk about that because it's a really important thing, but I want to talk about kind of in a little bit of an order. The most important thing that we can do as individuals that feel like your hormones are out of balance is the detective work to find out what's wrong. Okay? If your hormones are not producing, why not? If you have to take DHEA to get your energy up, why are your adrenal glands not making DHEA? If you have to take melatonin to sleep at night, why is your pineal gland and your pituitary, both are kind of partners in it, not working well enough to make enough melatonin to get you to sleep? If you have to take estrogen because your estrogen levels are low, why are they low? Just because you go through menopause doesn't mean your estrogen's supposed to shut down. Did you guys know that? We have a backup system for hormones. When your hormones are supposed to drop, they are supposed to drop, there's other systems that are supposed to come up and take up the load. Okay? Your breast tissue stores hormones. Your fatty tissue stores hormones. Hormones are produced in the lining of your intestines. But the most important organ responsible for hormones after your ovaries retire is the adrenal glands. If the adrenal glands are healthy, they take over the job. If they're not healthy, you have hot flashes, and you have moodiness, and you have sleeplessness, and you have all kinds of other symptoms. Okay?
How does
So
what you're
then-
saying differ?
What's that?
How does what you're telling us right now differ for those of us who had a hysterectomy?
It doesn't matter whether your ovaries retire surgically or naturally.
Oh.
It's still supposed to take over. The difference is when they retire normally, it's a slow taper, and the adrenals have a chance to kind of catch up. But when you have a hysterectomy and it's just like cut off at the knees, it takes a little bit for the adrenals to go, okay, what's going on? I mean, this whole system goes crazy when you have a hysterectomy, because everybody's trying to balance and figure out where that balance is, and the adrenals haven't had a chance to come up and do it. But one of the problems is most people have weak adrenals today. If you have fatigue, more than likely it's the adrenals. We give a whole class on fatigue, but just in a nutshell, the two main systems with fatigue is thyroid and adrenals. So the thyroid is like your engine in your car is running, but you're in neutral. The adrenals are the engine of your car is running and you're in drive. Okay? So they're both controlling energy levels. But most people, because of our environment, have such weak adrenals, it's not doing its job. Okay? Yes?
There are blood pressure medications that suppress the adrenals too.
Yes. There are.
That can't be good.
It's not good. That gets into a whole different topic. But you're right. And that's part of the problem, is there are a lot of things that suppress the adrenals. But there's a lot of things you do have control of that can help your adrenals. So first of all, we have to look at what would weaken your adrenals in the first place. So let's stop a minute. Who knows what your adrenals are? Does everybody know where they are? Okay. Yes. They sit on top of the kidney like a little acorn cap, sitting right up here. Okay? And it is the hormonal part of the kidney system. But the adrenals secrete a lot of hormones. So they secrete DHEA, which gives you sustained energy throughout the day. The adrenals, like I say, produce estrogen and progesterone as your ovaries are retiring, either surgically or naturally, and take over the job of that. It's most known for its fight or flight mechanism, where it's producing estrogen, adrenaline or noradrenaline, epinephrine, norepinephrine, depending on how you learned it. And they're both the same thing, by the way. And they produce cortisol. Now, cortisol is one of these hormones that is going crazy in people. What have you guys heard about cortisol? Bad. Why is it bad? Yeah, it tells your body to store more fat. Do you know you have a lot of control over cortisol? So there's only two things that cause cortisol to surge. One is stress, and the other is sugar. You cut the sugar, your adrenals can get a little bit healthier. Then what happens is, because the adrenals are healthier, you handle stress better. And because you handle stress better, you take that load off the adrenals and they get even better. And because they get better, you handle stress even better. And so now it has less of a negative effect, and it gets better, and then the adrenals get better. A lot of times it's more complicated than that, and we have to do other things to support it. But for some people, it's just a matter of cutting the sugar. But cortisol is not just a bad guy, okay? It depends on what your body's gonna do with the cortisol that matters, okay? So, let me show you something. Cortisol is supposed to come out on a regular basis throughout the day, okay? It's at its highest level at 8 a.m. and then it's at its lowest level at 8 p.m., back up at 8 a.m., okay? And it's supposed to just kind of be released a little bit, all throughout the day. That is normal. Why? Cortisol converts to cortisone, which is your natural anti-inflammatory hormone. Anybody know what prednisone is? Prednisone is a synthetic version of it. You have to have cortisol. And there was a drug that came out a number of years ago, I think probably 10 years ago. It wasn't on the market for more than maybe 6 months. And it suppressed cortisol.
Oh.
And people started dying. Their inflammation would just rage out of control. And it got pulled off the market before most people even knew it was on the market. You saw it on TV for a while, and then boom, it was gone because people were just dropping. You have to have cortisol. The problem is when it goes like this, and it surges. Because when it surges is when it tells the body you gotta store fat. When it surges, it suppresses your immune system. When it surges, it interferes with your sleep. But when it comes out normally, it helps your sleep. And when it comes out normally, it helps you burn fat. And when it comes out normally, well, it doesn't really support immune system, but it can be affected by the immune system. So this is like a double-edged sword. So the more you can control cortisol by strengthening the adrenals, then you start controlling other mechanisms in here. So the adrenals also produce a hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone regulates eye sensitivity to light. How many of you wear sunglasses? When your adrenals are healthy, you don't need sunglasses. Okay? It's
Even with blue
just started.
eye?
Well,
Yeah, just last week, I was like, I can't see, it's too bright.
okay.
It's the first time I've done that in years.
All right. So this is something for you to take notice of.
Yeah.
So what happens is the adrenals control the closing of the eyes, the pupils, so that the light doesn't penetrate into the rods and cones as far as it does. So when the light shines in your eyes, it's supposed to clamp down and hold it out as long as that light is in your eyes. But if your adrenals are too weak, it'll clamp down and then it can't quite hold it and it'll start to dilate. And then it'll clamp down again and then it dilates and it clamps down and it dilates. So there's 4 stages of adrenal functioning as it shows up in the eyes. Stage 1 is perfect, clamps down, nothing happens. You can be out in the brightest sunlight. I don't care if you're blonde or from Sweden, or it doesn't matter where you are. You can be out in the brightest sunlight and it doesn't bother you, okay? In a stage 2, as the adrenals are weakening and it's doing this pumping action where it's not quite winning but it's not losing either, those are people that sometimes they need sunglasses and sometimes they don't. In a stage 3, as the adrenals get weaker and it doesn't produce as much aldosterone, pupils will constrict and dilate and stay dilated. Those are people who don't leave home without their sunglasses, okay? Stage 4, pupils don't even constrict. Those are people who usually have to wear glasses even indoors. If you're having an issue with nighttime glares, the adrenals are not holding the light out, okay? So these are all one indication. There's lots of indicators for that. But you can use just simple sunglasses to know what your adrenals are doing. So when you get treatment and we get your adrenals back up online again, and you realize, hey, I'm outside and I don't need sunglasses, and then maybe a couple years down the line, you've kind of slipped a little bit maybe in your foods or in what you're doing, and you start noticing I'm sensitive again, make a mental note, I better get back in and get back on track again before it goes really bad. So the adrenals are a way of helping. If you get dizzy, if you stand up quickly, that's a sign of adrenal weakness. So the detective work is a really important thing to find out. And if you look at your symptoms, are symptoms bad?
No.
Symptoms are nothing more than a red flag telling you something is wrong. And if you ignore it, what happens? What happens if your warning indicator light goes off on your car and you ignore it? Eventually it's going to break down, it's going to cost you a whole lot more than it did in the beginning, and that's what happens in the body too. So if you look at symptoms as a red flag, the sooner you get on top of it, the better. But if you put a piece of duct tape on your warning indicator light, you might not see the problem, but the problem's still there and eventually it catches up. So coming back specifically to hormones, hormones are highly active chemical messengers that are talking amongst themselves. If a level of something goes up, a level of something else goes down. If that goes down too much, something else is going to get affected or something's going to stimulate that. So let's use thyroid for instance. How many people know what a TSH is in their lab test? TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone made by the pituitary. So the thyroid's getting sluggish and it's kind of going down in its function. The pituitary says, oh man, I got to send thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, to kick the thyroid in the back end and get it moving again. That's why when that number is high, it means your thyroid is low. Because if the pituitary is sending out more thyroid stimulating hormone, it's trying to get your hormone to work better, trying to get your thyroid to work better. So they use that as a measurement to see, what your thyroid's doing. The question is, if your thyroid's not working, why isn't it working? That's what has to happen. So your TSH is up, and what do they give you if you're hypothyroid? They give you more hormone, right? Because the thyroid's not producing it, so let's give it to them. And what do we call that? We call that hormone replacement. Now, a lot of people, when they think of hormone replacement, they're just thinking of estrogen, testosterone. They don't think about DHEA is hormone replacement. Melatonin is hormone replacement. Thyroid meds are hormone replacement.
Did not know that.
What's that?
I did not know that.
They are all hormone replacements. What do you think happens if we just keep feeding the thyroid the hormone it's supposed to make?
It gets weak.
It gets weak. It goes, oh, I've got too much hormone, I better stop. Because we can't regulate it the same way the body does. I don't care how hard we try. We are not as smart as this body is. And so what happens is it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting flooded with this stuff. I gotta stop making it. And it starts tapering back. Same with testosterone and estrogens, all the different estrogens. It goes, oh my gosh, we're overmaking this, we better stop. And it starts to shut down. It tapers back. And what happens with you is as it tapers back, then all of a sudden the same symptoms that you had that you took it for are back again. Because the body's trying to make this all work. Now you may have more symptoms because other things are shutting down too in response to that. So what do? They increase your dosages. How many of you, either yourself or somebody else, so you don't have to fess up being you if you don't want to, but how many of you or somebody you know has had to keep increasing their thyroid meds or their estrogen or any of their hormone replacement because it no longer works? And things like melatonin are getting stronger and stronger because it's no longer working for people. Because the body keeps tapering back.
So if your thyroid, like I just got tested and they said my thyroid was fine, so I don't take it, but I still have all the other stuff.
Thank you for bringing that up. That is such an important point. Most people don't realize that lab tests are end-stage results. Okay, and what I mean by that is that back in the 80s, lab tests were labeled as normal values. What do they say today? Reference ranges. Okay, it's not normal, because what the labs used to say is, this is normal and this is this, but I still feel lousy. And they go, well, what do I do? The doctor's like, well, you're not sick enough, I can't do anything about it yet. So they took away the normals and put only what is the stage of crisis, the point that they can intervene. So your lab tests are point of crisis. By the time something shows up in the body, one of the main functions of blood is to create homeostasis in the body. So balance through all of the systems. And so when something is lacking, it's going to steal it from someplace. It's going to beg, borrow, and steal from every organ, every gland, every tissue, the bones, wherever they can get to create constancy and normalcy in the body. So by the time it shows up in the labs, you've exhausted all your resources, and the body has nothing else to draw on. You are now in trouble. The problem with the thyroid is it's one of the most amazing glands. It will adapt and adapt and adapt and adapt, and you have to lose about 85% function before you show up in a lab test as being in crisis. That's why you can show up good in your labs and you still feel like crap. So you're not sick enough to be considered a site in crisis, so you just have to wait till you're sick enough, and then they can give you something, okay? Or you can choose to, let's just handle it now.
It's been 28 years, and, you know, I'm still dealing with it and trying to figure it out.
Okay, has anybody worked on your adrenals?
No.
Okay, these two guys are sisters. Sisters, that didn't quite come out right. Okay. These two glands are like sisters. If the adrenals are down, thyroid's down. If thyroid's down, adrenals are down. They are always working side by side and symptomatically almost identical. There are some differences, like the postural hypotension, getting dizzy when you stand up quickly, and the paradoxical pupillary reflex in the eyes are a different symptom from thyroid. So there's some differences, but there's a lot of similarities. And what I have found through the years is if you don't treat them together, and in fact, the complication with the endocrine system is we keep micromanaging it. We can't micromanage this. As you can see, let's just target insulin. Everybody else has got to change every time you take insulin. Everything's got to adjust. You take an inhaler. The adrenals have to, that's going to affect the adrenals the most. This whole system has to change. You take a thyroid med, they all have to change. It's a feedback loop. So too much of here means you've got to, increase this or decrease this, and they've all got to adjust. Yeah.
Is there different types of tests you can take for the thyroid, like what'd you say, the TSH?
The TSH.
TSH, but is there a T4,
There's T3, there's T4, there's reverse T3, reverse T4, there's free T3.
And what's the difference in those
T4.
two? For her example, will there be a different outcome for
It could
the
very
different
well
tests?
be. It could very well be. If they're not testing the whole gamut, then it's possible. And another thing that happens is they'll be good on T3, T4, and most of the other parameters, the reverse and the free, and everything looks okay, but they never did a TPO. To me, the TPO is one of the most important tests, and it's the most rarely used form for thyroid, unless they think you have an autoimmune thyroid disease. And a TPO, it's called the thyroid peroxidase test, is an autoimmune test. And I am amazed at how many people have perfect lab numbers, but they've got everything that indicates thyroid, and I do a TPO, and they've got an autoimmune thyroid problem. And an autoimmune thyroid problem is a problem that has progressed to an autoimmune stage. It's not like a different disease that jumps in the body. It is a progression that has continued to an autoimmune stage. So what happens in an autoimmune condition, any place in the body, doesn't matter what it is, But since we're talking about thyroid, we'll talk about the thyroid. So, I am not an artist, so I'm gonna kind of, oh, that is really bad. Okay, so that's supposed to be a thyroid. So what happens is the thyroid gets stressed. Maybe it gets injured because it gets hit or something in an accident. And it leaks thyroid cells into the bloodstream. And the immune system says, that doesn't belong in there. And it launches an attack and says, okay, we got to get rid of these guys because they don't belong in the bloodstream. And that's okay. That's a normal immune response. It's supposed to do that, okay? But if it keeps doing that, it starts to exhaust the immune system. And the immune system's like, holy cow, I've got to stop this somehow. And instead of going after all this, it goes after this. So one way to look at it is you come home one day and your kitchen is flooded. And you discover you left your kitchen faucet running. And so you scramble around the house and you get mops and brooms and towels and you start sopping up the water like crazy, but the faucet's still running. That's what's going on here, is the immune system keeps trying to sop up the mess, but this is still leaking continually. So you have to stop up the problem. And nobody addresses the health of the thyroid. What do they give you when you have a thyroid disorder? They give you more hormone, but who's doing something to heal the thyroid? Who's doing something to stop the leaking?
Which leads me to the question, can it be healed?
Absolutely.
Can you get off thyroid?
It depends on how long you're on it. It depends on how much is going on with the immune system. I've had people come in with thyroid issues that were so bad that I didn't think there was any way we could heal it, or that we could make a difference but not completely get them off, and I've gotten them off. I've had people that were on thyroid meds 24, 28 years. And
Yeah,
got them
that's
off.
me, and I'm
The
sick of it.
rule of thumb is usually just a few years. If they've been on more than a few years, it gets very difficult, if not impossible, because the thyroid starts to shrivel when you're on thyroid meds. So it depends on a lot of factors. If you're on the synthetics, the chances are it's going to be very difficult to get off. If you're on Thyroid or Armor, chances are pretty good you can get off, because that's at least feeding more than just hormones. It's actually desiccated thyroid and helping to heal that a little bit. It's still a drug, it's still not a good way to do it, but it's a better than. And so it's very individual. It
As a
depends on
patient, we
everything
don't
else going
have
on.
a choice though. They
What's
don't
that?
ask. As a patient, we don't have a choice. They give us what they give us.
You do have a choice. The problem is that without education, you don't know what the choices are.
I just wanted to be on like the natural thyroid, so
And
that
they don't like giving it out. And they say it's because they can't regulate it precisely. Okay? I'm sorry, but the thyroid doesn't work on a precise time clock. It doesn't work on preciseness. And neither does any other gland. They are constantly changing every single minute of every day. So to put it on preciseness when it's not used to preciseness makes no sense at all. I would rather have this crazy other stuff that, you know, is a different pattern. But it's still hormone replacement. Yeah.
So if your thyroid's not functional or whatever you're on, and then you titrate off or whatever you get off, and you're still not well, if these two are sisters, what if your adrenals are bringing down your thyroid and they're
See,
back and forth, and then
That's such a
really
good
not
point.
the problem with
It
the
brings back
adrenals.
what I said just a little bit ago. You gotta treat the whole system. If we just target just the thyroid or we target just the adrenals, we're not gonna be able to bring it. You have to treat the entire system. Find out who is bringing the system down. And it may not be the thyroid, it may be the pancreas. I know you can't see this from back there, but this has a dotted line. And what that dotted line means is that when that is stressed, it suppresses that. Okay? So when your pancreas is not working well, and why would your pancreas not be working well? Because you're eating too much sugar. So it's going to suppress your thyroid function. So we need to find out, and that may not be for you. Some people are so good in their diet, and they still come in and they're a mess hormonally. And that may be an issue and it may not be. That's why it's so important to really unpeel things and figure out who's not doing their job. But if you have any hormonal problems, you have to look at the entire system. You can't just treat it one organ at a time. So coming back to the question on the hormone replacement on natural versus whatever. When you take hormonal replacement, HRT, hormone replacement therapy, DHEA, melatonin, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, when you take that, the organ says, I don't have to work anymore. And a way to look at it is, let's say you have a 40-year-old son still living at home. And every day you kind of give him the boot and say, hey, you know, get off your tush and go get a job. But as he's walking out the door, you hand him a $100 bill. Okay? Think he has much incentive to work? If he does that every day, he's making like $3,000 a month, and all he has to do is walk out the door. Okay, right? There's no incentive. And that's what happens to our glands. You hand it a free ride, and there's no incentive for it to get up and do its job. And it just gets lazier and lazier and lazier. And sometimes it starts with one system, but cycles through, and you start having more and more and more problems. And in the endocrine system, that is mostly what happens.
So it's putting stress on everybody else, because they have to work harder to.
Exactly, exactly. Now, what happens if you have your thyroid taken out? I mean, you do have to have hormone replacement at that point. There's nothing you can do about it. And your system will always be stressed. Unfortunately, you will always have problems with this, but if you can keep the rest of it strong, it won't have as much of an impact. So if you're working on keeping off sugar, and maybe you're doing some liver detox, and you're strengthening your adrenals and your pituitary, and the hypothalamus is like, that's the king of the whole system, even though the pituitary is considered the master gland. It has the direct effect on here. Pituitary. How many of you consume artificial sweeteners? They have an affinity for the pituitary gland and weaken the pituitary glands. If you're consuming artificial sweeteners, you're pretty much guaranteed to have some hormonal disruption on all kinds of levels. So get that out of your diet as fast as you can. Yes.
That includes xylitol?
Yes. Xylitol is not as, the problem with xylitol is everybody looks at it and goes, oh, xylitol is birch bark. They don't use birch bark anymore. It's too expensive. They use high fructose corn syrup. So you have different issues now with it.
What if you
And
buy
so-
ones that say, that they say on there that's
If
birch
it
bark,
says on
USA
there-
made, birch bark?
If it looks, and this is the same with stevia, okay? If it looks like a tincture, like a tea that's been concentrated, then it's the real stuff, okay? But like if your stevia is white or clear, it's been processed so much that it's more damaging, okay? So if it says birch bark and it's white, it's highly processed. So birch bark, even though it's a white tree, is very dark brown when it's been processed. So I don't know what yours looks like. I know there are some out there, it's white. And I know that there's some out there. So that's true of stevia, because everybody always says when they talk about artificial sweeteners, does that include stevia? And stevia has more complaints with the FDA than any other food does.
So
With
with
side effects.
unrefined brown, regular sugar that hasn't been refined and all that, would that be just as good as the stevia and all that other
Your
stuff?
best would be honey.
Right.
Honey's always number one, but yes,
Local
things
honey.
like sucanat and rapidura and demerara, those are all sugars that have not been processed. They will be better than your white stevia or your white xylitol or anything like that. You know, xylitol is great in that, you know, it really does help with, you know, get the stickiness off your teeth, which is really beneficial for teeth health, but it doesn't do that in the body. So how many of you have had an A1C done, a hemoglobin A1C test? It's one of the tests that they do for blood sugar to see if you're diabetic. What hemoglobin A1C is, when you eat sugar, it coats your cells, okay? And your cells have about a 3-month life expectancy. And so every 3 months, cells are dying. Actually, cells are dying every single day. But all your cells have been replaced every 90 days. And so when they do a hemoglobin A1C test, they are testing to see how thick that layer of sugar is on that cell, on average, and they can tell how much sugar you're eating. And it's because sugar is sticky. And so that's what they're measuring. It would be really nice if xylitol would go in and take the stickiness off the cells, because that would help a lot. But it doesn't. It only does it in the mouth. Okay? The problem with hormone replacement is this very delicate feedback loop that says, okay, I'm high in this area, I better get higher in this area, or I better lower this. This constant communication, this very delicate balance. Not only is it important to treat together, but when one goes down, it's a domino effect, and they all start having problems. And what people notice a lot when they've been on hormone replacement, if you've been on long enough, you start noticing more and more symptoms, because more and more systems aren't doing their job. So one of the things we have to look at is, why are they not doing their job? Why would you say, pick any of those, are not doing their job? What would cause a gland to, does it just say, hey, you know what, I have nothing to do today, I think I'm just gonna take a nap all day, yeah.
Like liver?
Or for the next month or for the next year, whatever. Okay, so liver. What would cause the liver to not do its job? Toxins. Where do we get toxins? Where don't we get toxins? Yeah.
Food,
So like what's in your house that would be toxic?
furniture, formaldehyde, all that,
Mold.
mold.
Mold could be. Candles. Candles are one of the most toxic things in your household.
Really?
Room fresheners, absolutely toxic. Why is this important in a hormone class? Because a lot of your toxins, the candles and air fresheners in plastic bottles, act like estrogen and act like other hormones and take up the space. So you have a hormone receptor that a hormone is supposed to go in. Let's just say it's estrogen. And the hormone fits this receptor site just perfect. And when the hormone comes from the bloodstream and drops in the receptor site, we have an action and everybody's happy. Okay? The problem is you have in your environment what is called estrogen mimickers or xeno hormones. So xeno is XENO. And xeno hormones, this is why we're trying to change the kind of plastic in water bottles and things like that. Because those hormones, what happens is it sees this receptor site and says, oh goody, I'm going to drop in here. But it's the wrong shape. It fits, but it doesn't do the job. And so what happens is there's no action. But now, your nice good hormone comes, and it wants to drop in there, and it can't. Because that receptor site's full of something else. It's full of a hormone mimicker, full of a xenohormone. And now, even if you've got the hormones, it can't do anything. That's why some of the lab tests don't work. Because it's looking at the hormone wannabes, not the hormone successes. Okay? This is what gets you into a lot of trouble in a lot of places. So, if you research xenohormones or xenoestrogens, you will get a ton of information of where they come from. She was talking about furniture, the formaldehyde, the flame retardants that they use in your furniture, in your clothing, in your bedding. All of that by law has to be in there, and yet it's a hormone disruptor. Okay? A lot of your cosmetics contain estrogenic type activities. Soy isn't doing what we thought it was going to do for the immune system. I know back in the 80s, you know, we thought soy was like God's gift to man. We were so grateful for it. And now, you know, in the 1990s, we're like, oh, wait. I think we made a mistake. We better stop this soy stuff. And now it's getting pretty well known that soy is very damaging to our body, unless you use it properly. And very few people do that. So the only time soy is okay is if it's non-genetically modified and it's been fermented. That's the only time soy should ever be used. And most of the time it's not fermented. And we look at things like tofu. Well, tofu is fermented soy. The problem is it was heated at a very high temperature before they fermented it. And so that ruined it. And it made it damaging. So, I mean, I was a huge tofu. I could make a cheesecake out of tofu that could kill and nobody could tell that it was made out of tofu. And, I mean, I was a tofu queen. And now I haven't touched tofu in probably 15 years. But, yes.
How do we address the soy in our supplement capsules? Sometimes they have soy in it. Sometimes you can get supplements with olive oil, but it's rare. I see a lot of soy like in vitamin E and so forth.
You don't take it. So, I mean, that's how I look at it. I look at ingredients from two perspectives. One, is it going to help feed the condition, or is, in doing that, is it going to hurt something else? So if it's going to help this and hurt this, I haven't gained anything.
Right.
And so if I look at a supplement, I say, okay, it's got a decent vitamin E, which would be like sunflower oil or wheat germ oil, not D-alpha tocopherol. That is not real vitamin E. And I've got one in soy and one that's not. I'm going to take the one that doesn't have the soy in it. So it's a matter of, if you look at things on a gradient, you know, here's your really bottom of the barrel supplements, and I can tell you that probably 90% of the supplements on the market today are nasty. They're not building us without consequences someplace else. And then you've got, you know, better, best. And so anytime you can step it up. One of the things you will get in your packets if you've not been here before, because people who've been here before have had the packet already, you will get something that will teach you how to read a label on a vitamin supplement. So you can tell if something's going to help you or if it's going to actually harm you.
Thank you.
Okay?
Is there a reason to take supplements?
Yes, there is a reason to take supplements. Our soils are so depleted that we cannot get enough nutrients in our soils today. In a study that they did, the study's actually been repeated multiple times. The last one I heard of with the same study is you now have to eat 75 bowls of spinach to equal the nutritional value of a bowl of spinach in the 1950s.
That's sad.
75. And every about 10 years that keeps increasing, that number keeps increasing. Our soils are incredibly depleted. Fortunately, there's a whole movement now in permaculture and trying to get our soil health back, because we're starting to really recognize that the health of our soil is determining the health of the soil in us. And
I have gardens, raised beds, so I put in like good gardening, and all that. Does that bring it back?
Yeah, that's one of the things. There's lots of
So
ways.
does that make the spinach that I grow healthier? And
Yes. The more that you do it there, but sometimes people do things that they think are natural that can actually ruin your garden and kill some of the microflora. We're starting to really, really understand how the soil itself is building us or destroying us. And most of our soil doesn't have any of the mycorrhizae and the different bacteria in it anymore. Our soils are too sterile, which is part of the reason why our guts are so sterile. And we have to take probiotics. Like one of the things that gardening people, especially people that are into organics do to a garden, is they put vinegar to kill weeds. It's the worst thing you can do, because you actually sterilize the soil. And now your plants aren't going to be as healthy. And yet, you know, we look at vinegar and it's like, okay, vinegar is natural, but it actually sterilizes it. But if you guys, how many of you garden? Sweet, a lot of you do. Have any of you ever been to the I just forgot, the University of Idaho, the Extension Office to the Master Gardener Clinic.
Oh, I wish I could go.
You can go anytime you want to. They're open, I'm a master gardener and I don't manage the clinic, I volunteer at the clinic. But you can bring in a plant that's not doing well and we'll diagnose it and tell you what's going on with your soil and what you need to do with your soil so the plant, or we can tell you like if it's a certain insect, you can bring in an insect and we'll say, okay, the reason why you have the insect, insects, by the way, only attack sick plants, okay? They don't just come for no reason. When a plant is sick, it releases a pheromone that tells the bugs around, we got a sick plant, we've got a stressed plant, and then they come and attack the plant. And so you can bring your insect in, and we can look at it and say, okay, you have this certain insect that's attacking your plant. That means it's stressed, you're overwatering it, or you're underwatering, or there's not enough potassium in your soil, or there's not, which is not a problem here, by the way, or there's this or that going on. Well, it's not any different from the body. You know, if you have a certain disease, there's some kind of a deficiency, there's something that you're doing or not doing, maybe you're not watering enough, and you know, the body just doesn't decide one day, you know what, hey, let's have fun, we'll just have a heart attack today. You know, it takes 25 years to build a heart attack. Actually, they said that about 20 years ago, and I don't think it takes that long anymore. But it takes time for things to happen. And you have to lose about 40% function before you'll get the first symptom. So when you start getting symptomatic, your body's starting to scream out like, hey, you know, help. And hormones as the chemical messenger is like part of the foundation of that. So if your hormones are out of balance, they're going, help, something is wrong here. I need help. And to throw a drug at it doesn't handle the problem, okay? Handing the hormones $100 as they're walking down the street, not functioning for you, is not handling the problem. Yes, it makes you feel better, and it could be a very temporary solution, but it's not a good long-term solution because it is making you sicker, okay? Yeah.
Are you going to discuss the difference between, or if there is a difference between bioidenticals?
Yes, and I was just planning on going that direction, okay? So, she asked, is there a difference between bioidentical and synthetics? There is a difference, but not quite what we think there is. So, bioidentical hormones are theoretically from a natural source. If you are taking a single bioidentical hormone like just progesterone, the chances are you are getting a somewhat natural product. If you take a combination, you're going to have synthetic mixed in with natural. Okay? Almost all the combination products have some synthetic in with them. I don't know why that is, but it's pretty universal. The other thing is bioidentical hormones are not identical. They do not do identically in the body what we do. So there's a few little molecules that are a little bit different, and we think, okay, you know, you've got this exotic stream of, let's get a different color here. We've got this, you know, I'm just gonna do it kind of easy. We've got a couple bonds out here, and a bond here, and a bond here. We have this complex hormone, and then we get another one and it looks exactly like that, except maybe there's, instead of a double bond, there's just a single bond. It's not identical. It will not work the same way in the body. And you think, okay, that's not that big of a deal. What's the difference between H2O and H2O2?
Water.
What's the difference?
Hydrogen peroxide.
Okay, so one extra oxygen molecule is the difference, okay? Does that seem like that would be that big of a deal? It's just oxygen? This is water, this is hydrogen peroxide. Are they the same thing? There's only one oxygen difference, I mean, it can't be that different, but it is. H2O3, well, or just O3, is ozone. So, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of change, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to drink hydrogen peroxide like I will drink water. Even though it has more oxygen, you think, oh good, that's just more oxygen. But it's not the same in the body. And it's the same way with the bioidentical hormones. They are not identical. Exogenous hormones, which means a hormone that comes from out here and put in here, is not the same as the hormones that your body makes, the endogenous hormones that your body makes. It doesn't sit the same in the receptor sites. It doesn't have the same effect. It used to be kind of a universal thing that the bioidenticals is better than the synthetics. We're starting to find that there's more problems with bioidenticals than the synthetics. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, I would agree that bioidenticals would be better than synthetic, but now we're starting to see maybe not so. There's a lot of issues. Some of the issues with hormone replacement, whether it's bioidentical or synthetic, is increased incidence in breast cancer, increased incidence in strokes and heart attacks. Those are the main ones. I forgot my list at home of some of my notes. The increased incidence of atrophy, like vaginal atrophy, gonadal atrophy in men. And again, it's because the body's tapering back. It's like, I can't deal with all this. I'm drowning. I've got to stop making so much, and it just keeps tapering back. What do you do if you're on that? So in your surveys that you did at the beginning, I think probably 70 or 80% of you said sleep has been an issue. Okay? How do you sleep, especially if you're addicted to melatonin? And nobody wants to know that they're addicted to something, but if you can't sleep unless you take it, you're addicted to it. Okay? And your body won't make melatonin as long as you're giving it a free ride. So we have to get your pituitary back. And you may be looking at it that, oh, it's only because my ovaries are not working is why I'm not sleeping. But it's this whole system that's getting affected. So what do? The first thing you have to do is uncover who's not doing their job. Where is the origin of a lot of this stuff that's going on? And that has to be tackled, okay? You can only do that by doing enough testing to find out what's going on. Is it a nutritional problem? Is it a toxicity problem? What is the body, more than anything else, wants to be well? Your body knows how to be well. We don't have to, if we cut ourselves, we do not have to tell the body, okay, you need to send some cholesterol in there and heal that and send some fibrinogen in there and kind of stitch together. We don't have to tell the body what to do. Okay? It knows what to do. It knows what to do to heal you. So the question is, why isn't it? So what is it missing that it needs, or what's blocking? Do you have a bunch of xenoestrogens blocking these stupid receptor sites and it can't get in there? Okay? That's a pretty easy fix. You can do some detox work and do that as long as you do the right stuff. The other thing is maybe this receptor site isn't very healthy. And there's several things that affect that. The number one thing that affects the health of the receptor sites is fats. And the very fats we've been told to stay away from are the fats that heals it. Things like lard and beef fat and coconut oil and butter. Those are saturated fats that the body needs to make healthy receptor sites, whether it's insulin or estrogen or melatonin or anything else. You have to have healthy receptor sites. And if they're not healthy, that's one of the first places you start. Are you getting enough fat in your diet? How many of you eat margarine? Or how many of you are willing to admit you do?
I do. I admit it.
So, if I were to tell you one thing that you can do that would make a major impact on your hormones tonight, is to stop eating margarine or any kind of hydrogenated fat. Because it actually hardens those tissues and they just can't work well. And It stays in your body every time you eat it 600 days. It's affecting your body. So that little pat of butter that you had at the restaurant on your potato, in 2 years from now, it'll finally be gone. Don't even eat it at restaurants as a once in a while, okay? And it's gonna block the ability for your own fats to work properly. So, has a major impact. Inflammation is a huge problem. I'm glad you guys recognize that. Everybody that I talk to, it's always, no inflammation, we gotta get rid of inflammation. Inflammation is part of the healing process. It's the runaway inflammation, the out of control inflammation that we've gotta be worried about. Your anti-inflammatory hormones, which by the way, I'm not even sure I said when we talked about cortisol, is made from cortisol. Okay? Cortisol converts to cortisone. We started to talk about prednisone. And fat is the major component. So, how is your body going to make hormones? All of your hormones. Every one of your hormones is more fat than anything else. So if your body needs to make hormones and you're missing fats, what do you think is going to happen? It's not going to make a very good hormone, or it's going to be substandard in its function, or it's just not going to make it at all. So when you're trying to address hormonal issues, you better have fats in there, okay? How many, well, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to go on another tangent that's related. And it's actually cholesterol, fats that convert to cholesterol that make hormones. If you're taking a statin drug, you cannot make your hormones because you are stopping cholesterol. And cholesterol is needed by our body for about 200 different functions. And one major function is to make your hormones, to make your happy hormones. If you have issues with anxiety or depression, you need to take a look at what's going on. Do you have the resources the brain needs to make those hormones? So your dopamine, your serotonin, and your endorphins, and dinorphins, and enkephalins, all of those, are they being made? Do you have what the body makes? Body cannot make something out of nothing. You have to provide it. And we have lived with 7 decades of telling us that fat is bad for us. And that fat makes us fat. And we now know that's not true. And we now know that we have created this whole new realm of diseases that we never had because the body was not able to heal some of these issues because we have not been eating fat. And eating the wrong kind. You know that margarine was originally invented to fatten turkeys. That was its original function. Problem is, it killed them.
Oh, wow.
So they added yellow food coloring, because when they first introduced it in white, nobody would eat it. So they added yellow food coloring and some salt, and people would start eating it.
Oh, jeez.
So, we've been a big human experiment, but we can't go there right now. We need to go with where we are right now, and what we have control of. And what we have control of is fats. So, I want you guys, every time you have vegetables, which is every day, at least twice a day, to slather it with butter. Okay? Make your vegetables the carrier for the butter. Get the butter in there. You've got to have fats. I can't express that enough. And like I said, if you do nothing more than that, your body will love you. Okay? Yes?
So I have a question about testing, because you must do full panels, multiple panels. Do you do saliva or do you blood?
It depends on what I'm testing for, and it depends on what my suspicion is. I do both. Okay? I think that the saliva testing is more accurate than the blood testing is. Medical doctors don't agree with that, but what I've seen in my practice when I've used saliva testing, because saliva is the real guys, not the wannabes. Okay? The real guys is what the saliva shows. The blood shows the wannabes. It shows what's trying to get in there, but not what's successful. Okay, do you understand the difference? So saliva is telling you what's actually going on in the system. And so I believe that's more accurate. A lot of medical doctors don't agree with that. But I've seen it in practice way too often. All right, so deficiencies of the building materials. A way of looking at it is if you were gonna build a home and you brought all the building materials to the site and you had the sheetrock and you had the roofing material, you had the flooring materials and you had your nuts and bolts and your electrical and your plumbing and you had it all on the site and you forgot the wood, could you build a home?
No.
Yes, you could. Wouldn't be very substantial, but you can screw sheetrock together, okay? You could build some semblance, but it's not gonna have the structural integrity. It's not gonna do the job it was intended to do, and it's not gonna take much force of nature to crumble it. And that's the same way in the body. So your body could make a substandard cell, but it's not gonna have the structural integrity. It's not gonna do the job it was intended, and it's not gonna take much stressors, whether that's stressors from your diet, or stressors from stress, or from the environment, to cause it to collapse. So when we talk about nutritional deficiencies, think about it as far as, oh, we forgot the wood, or, oh, we forgot the nails. We'll just slam some wood together, which you could do, I guess, if you cut it and notched it like we used to do with log homes. Think about, the materials that are missing. If you built a log home and you didn't have any chinking, you're gonna be pretty cold. It'll still hold together, but you're probably gonna be pretty cold and it'll break down easier because it's gonna be getting water and moisture in between and everything else. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other nutrients before I get to this one part I was just gonna say. So we need minerals. Every single organ in this system has a mineral that it's dependent on for function. What does thyroid need? I know some of you know this.
Iodine.
Iodine, thank you.
That's right.
Does anybody know what pancreas needs? Chromium. Okay? The adrenals need sodium and copper. Actually, the kidneys need sodium, the adrenals need copper. Pituitary needs manganese. The gonads need zinc, and with women, zinc and manganese, both. All through the system, all of these have mineral activators. Without the minerals, they can't do their job. Yes?
I was just reading a couple days ago about boron and how important it is, and nobody ever talks of, I've never heard about boron supplement or.
Boron it's accurate. And every time we've done a hair analysis, which is one way of determining what levels are, people are like, there's no boron in their system at all. All the trace elements are important. It's not a good idea to just start taking boron capsules, okay? It's just not a good way to do that. And that's part of that micromanaging that we like to do. We like to just take one thing and address it. And people do that with supplements too. Oh, I'm low in zinc, I'm gonna just take a bunch of zinc. I'm low in copper, I'm gonna take a bunch of copper. You're gonna get in trouble real fast with copper. You do that. And they wanna micromanage the minerals too. And that's the worst thing you can do. You need to take a broad spectrum, take it from a food source, like kelp, or alfalfa, or wheatgrass, or spirulina, or chlorella, where it's got the whole gamut together in a food form, in a good composition, and take that and feed that system. Yes?
Is there a gland that that magnesium affects?
Magnesium affects pretty much every organ and tissue at some degree or another. But don't take a bunch of magnesium, because if you do, you start suppressing. Like you suppress, if you take too much magnesium, which a lot of people do, they suppress zinc, they suppress copper, they suppress calcium, they suppress boron is one of them, selenium, I can't remember all the ones, but it suppresses a lot of other ones. And so now you've got a ricochet effect going on with your minerals too. And we become so segregated. You have a cardiologist that does nothing but the heart. You have your dermatologist that does nothing but your skin, your GI, and we're becoming so separated. We have to start thinking more globally. You are a whole body that needs whole elements, not pieces. We do not have the intelligence to micromanage any system with minerals. We just can't do it. It is so complex. And it's an arrogance to think that we can do it better than the body. Feed the body. Just feed it. Most of the time, we're not even eating enough food with enough nutrient density to just feed the body. And that gets into a whole thing. But when you're trying to get your hormones on track, we need fats, we need minerals, we need good quality protein. Not roasted nuts, you need raw nuts. You need to get good quality proteins. All of these are the building blocks of hormones. So if you're not getting enough protein, then you're not going to make enough hormones, and you're going to have symptoms of hormone deficiency. And then whatever system that's affecting, it's going to have this ricochet and domino effect on the entire endocrine system. Okay? I want to make sure that we have time to cover a couple of different things. One is, how do we get off them if you want to get off them? That is probably the hardest thing you will do in your life with your health. Getting off from bioidentical hormones is not what is the saying, something in the park?
Walk in the park.
A walk in the park, thank you. It's not a walk in the park. It can be absolutely miserable. I have one patient who, I was sure it was her bioidentical hormones that were causing her migraines. Absolutely flat out would not get off from them. And we did a lot of things of building up her system and getting minerals, getting the fats. She was a runner. She was a Ironman runner, and every other marathon and run that came along. And with all the things that we did, we were able to get rid of her migraines, except every time she ran, she still got a migraine.
Huh.
And no matter what we did, we could not break that. And I just suspected it was her hormones. But she was just flat out, I'm like, let's just do a saliva test. Let's just see where your hormones are. And her numbers came back and they just floored me. And in fact, they were so bad that the lab called me. They didn't just send me the results, they just said, this woman is on hormone replacement, and if you don't get her off, she's gonna die.
Well,
And I'm like, okay, enough said. I called her up and I'm like, you're in my office right now, we need to talk. And so she decided that maybe she better get off. And it was not a walk in the park. She hated me for probably 3 months.
How long was she on?
And she was on, I'm thinking 8 or 9 years. And for 3 months, she was an emotional wreck. I mean, she was bad, and we kept supporting and just hang in there, it's gonna get better. She finally got better. It took almost a year. It is not an easy thing to do, but she was headache-free. She no longer has headaches at any time. And it was about the 3-month mark that she stopped getting migraines every time she wrote. And those migraines put her down for 3 days.
I'm sure.
They were bad. They were some of the worst migraines I've ever seen. I mean, she was down to like 94 pounds because she would just vomit and vomit and vomit and vomit, and then she'd go run again. And get another migraine and do it again. It's like, okay, at some point, for me, I would say, hey, forget the running stuff. I'm gonna do something else, but she absolutely flat out would not stop running.
It's an
And-
adrenaline
Was she
rush.
able to overcome the original reason why she went on the bioidentical?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it's
And
probably
that's
more
part of
victorious.
that is part of the victory.
Yes.
Is that not only did we finally get her off and all her hormonal issues were gone, but her migraines were gone. And she was almost, her marriage was on the rocks for a while. And I have to say, going through the withdrawal put her marriage on the rocks as well. But I kept having conversations with her husband,
Well, that's good.
like, stay in this. This is only temporary, guaranteed, but just stay in it. I have another gal that we went through with it, the same thing. She didn't even know how sick she was until we started getting off. And then when she got off them, she's like, oh my gosh, she's older than I am. So she's in her late 60s. And she didn't realize, because her health had been degrading just so slowly, that it wasn't until she got off. She had so much energy. She's like, I haven't felt this good since I was in my 20s.
been suppressed, all her systems.
Yeah, everything was suppressed for so long, but so insidiously. And that's part of the problem with the hormone replacement, is it's so insidious, and you feel so good when you first start. When you start feeling crappy again, you don't realize it's your hormones that's doing that.
Do you
Yeah.
take people off cold turkey?
No, I don't. I don't like, well, no, I take it back. This gal that I was just now talking about, she wanted to go off cold turkey. And I kept telling her, you don't want to do that. She's like, yes, I do. And I'm like, no, we need to really take longer. We need to take at least 6 months. And she's like, no, I want off now. And
Wow.
and she also hated me for a while. But she's on the other end of it now, and she's, like I said, she just can't believe how much better she feels. The other girl we tapered, I think we tapered only for 3 months, and then she says, I'm done with this, I'm going off from it. That is such a hard way to do it. You can do that. You can go off cold turkey. But did you?
Yeah.
It was hard, wasn't it?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I've had plenty of patients, I guess, that it wasn't hard, but I've had plenty of patients that it was hard. So, and it also depends on how much you're on, which hormones you're on. Some are harder to get off than others, how long you've been on them, what kind of hormones. It's easier to get off something like armored thyroid than it is off Thyroid. You know, so it kind of depends on, your bioidenticals are easier to get off than your synthetics. Yes.
I was just wondering if you have the pellets, like the thyroid and estrogen pellets, and that's absorbed, does it just naturally taper itself off as you run out of it?
Yeah, but your pellets are only 30 days though, aren't they?
No, I get like every 6 months or so. Just whenever I start having symptoms.
That's a little different issue. That's going to be handled a little bit differently. Typically, you want to taper, and when we taper, we're doing, like if you're taking 2 pills a day, you know, a morning and an evening dose, we'll take 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And depending on how you're feeling, that could last anywhere from a week to a month. And then we might go, well, actually, we do 2 a day, then 1 a day, 2 a day, then 1 a day. And then we drop it to 1 and 1, and then we drop it to half and half. And then we just keep titrating it. But I want to tell you, it is not good for your glands to just go cold turkey unless you're supporting them at the same time. If you're not doing something to support them, it's going to be a miserable journey. And if it's been long enough and bad enough, it's still going to be a miserable journey. But, you know, they talked about they got off them at cold turkey. And there's been plenty of people that have gone off cold turkey that didn't have to suffer. Unfortunately, we're not going to know till you start. Yeah.
Would that apply to hormonal creams instead of the?
Absolutely applies to hormone
Same
creams.
thing.
Anything on your skin goes into your bloodstream.
Right.
And part of the problem with that, and hormone creams are almost worse, because what they do is they get into the fatty tissue, and then the body just indiscriminately dumps it. So one day you'll get, you know, you might get 200 milligrams of a flow, and another day you might get 5. And another day you might not get any. And it's radical changes. And that's part of the problem with hormone therapy, but the creams are worse for that. And I used to be an advocate for the creams because I thought that maybe it was more stable going that way, and it turns out it's not. You know, I've been willing to be wrong a lot during the last 40 years of practice because there's just so much, you know, when I first started in practice, the only hormones we knew of was Premarin. And, you know, that was horse urine, and we learned a long time ago that horse estrogens are not the same as our estrogens are. So, and, you know, without progesterone, it causes breast cancer, and there's all kinds of problems with it. But sometimes we have to learn it. I mean, we do. We learn as we go along, as we create new and better things. And these hormones that people are taking, if you've got, you know, kids or grandkids or something that's taking these depot shots, or they're taking hormones that they stop their periods, or that they're taking, you know, once a month for birth control, boy, do they mess up their systems so bad. They mess them up so bad if you know of anybody doing that. And birth control pills mess up your hormones too. It's the same thing. Birth control pills are hormone replacement too. Yeah.
Have you heard much about hormonal transfer between married couples?
So hormonal transfer, are you talking about like if a man is taking testosterone gel?
If you're taking, yeah.
Yes, if a man is doing a
Or a woman,
testosterone,
it's
or a
the
woman,
opposite.
yes. That when you guys have skin contact, yes, you could transfer that.
Huh.
So technically, the men aren't supposed to love the women's after they're had the cream because they'll give the woman too much testosterone, but that never stops. So, yeah.
It would appear that your chart would be a pretty good indicator as to why there's such an increased incidence of cancer.
Absolutely.
And there's so much misinformation, you don't know what to do or what to believe. We have so many people we know that are suffering, and I know you probably don't have time to go into that, but for anybody that is concerned, that we could perhaps send to you, how effective would, I'll call them treatments, to get their hormones in balance, would it have a positive effect?
Well, that's a pretty open-ended question that I can't answer. The reason why is there's so many variables. What else is going on? What kind of cancer? How advanced is it? What's going on in their diet? What's going on in their lifestyle? What I can tell you is cancer is a multifaceted disease. There's not one cause. So there has to be several different things going on at the same time that coalesce and cause degeneration of the cells. It's rarely one thing. So breast cancer, it's not just because you have hormone replacement. Because if that were the case, then everybody that had hormone replacement would have breast cancer. And that doesn't happen that way. So cancer has to have a combination of things going wrong at the same time. Just that perfect combination. I don't know if you want to use the word perfect, but
Imperfect combination.
the perfect imperfect combination that has to go on. It's a multifaceted issue, and it has to be broken down into some of the essential components to treat. So I can't tell you for sure how much impact it'll have because I don't know enough about their individual case. Everybody is different. Everybody's combination of things are different. And it doesn't matter what label we put it on. I mean, cancer is nothing more than abnormal cell growth. So why are the cells behaving abnormally? What's going on in that? So we have to look at it from that standpoint. So
Is there a specific test for seeing if your thyroid is healthy enough for you to go off of thyroid?
there's not a specific test, it's a combination of tests.
Combination of tests.
I want to make sure, for instance, if you come see me, and you know what, the type of work that we do, we use herbs, we use acupuncture, we're using nutrition, isn't for everybody. It's a path that you are following to wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's not. Depends on where you are in life. And so, first of all, we have to look at what's wrong. Put together what we think, what I think, and I say we because I have an associate, okay? What we think is best for you based on that, and then it's your choice whether you choose to walk down this path. Are you willing, for instance, if we find out that the pancreas is what's causing all the craziness in that, and I ask you to stop sugar, mm-hmm. Are you willing to take that path and not eat sugar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, not everybody is going to want to do what is needed to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's the same with your friends too. They may feel, just like, well, I've got cancer, I'm going to die, and what's the point? We don't know. Not everybody has a will to live. You guys do, or you wouldn't be here. You guys want to be well, or you wouldn't be here. Okay? But a couple things, like what we do is we do what's called a complete biofunctional analysis. And we are looking at those systems. So in the thyroid, we've got about 3 different systems, 3 different tests that we do to see what's going on with your thyroid. And we've got about 4 different ones that we do to see what's going on with the adrenals. and I think it was about 3 on the pancreas. We've got redundancy in some of our testing to look at the whole picture and what's going on. So on this complete biofunctional analysis, there's like 27 different assessment tools that we use to figure out what's going on in the system. And then what we do is when you come in, first we do a thorough history. I want to know everything that's going on, because your body is a complex system, and every symptom means something. And I'm looking at it, okay, we've got this big puzzle, and I've got everything, I've got a bunch of pieces, and now I've got to put the picture together, but I don't know what the picture is. And so the more I know about you, via the testing that we do, via what you tell me that's going on, you might bring in lab works, you might bring in MRIs, the more pieces of the puzzle I have, the more complete the picture is. And I'm not going to treat the piece of puzzle piece. I'm going to treat the picture.
Right.
Okay? So the problem is that we keep fixing the puzzle pieces with a thyroid medication, or maybe some insulin, or maybe some testosterone, or some estrogen. That's what we're used to, is treating the puzzle pieces. But the endocrine is one of those systems you can't do that with. You have to treat the system, not the individual pieces. So it would be like an orchestra, and you take out the drums. It's going to change how the whole symphony works, because that's the pace setter. And so it all has to be worked together. And so what we do is, I sit down with you, talk to you, find out what's going on. Then we do our complete biofunctional analysis. We do all of the testing. Then you come back and we talk about, okay, what did I find? How is that affecting you? What happened? What made that go wrong? And then what our plan is to help get you back to a state of good health. And if you're on hormone replacement, and the thing is you do have a choice of any aspect. You may say, I don't want to go through hell for a year, or I don't want to go through that for a month, or whatever, and we just slow it down. Other people may say, hey, I'm done. I'm gonna gruel through it, help me through it. You get to choose, you get to set the pace. You get to decide what you need. Well, I'm going to decide what you need. You get to choose which of that you want to do. So we do a report of findings and a customized health recovery plan. And, it's amazing what the body can do when it's given the right tools. I wanted to read, if I have it here. We've been talking mostly about women, but I wanted to read a testimonial about a man that I had treated with testosterone. And we didn't talk too much about it, but I want to say one thing of caution to people, to men in particular, on testosterone, is the testosterone, especially the gels, the incidence of prostate cancer is very high. And I had a patient one time that was furious when I said that. And he went to his medical doctor, to his urologist, and said, is it true that there's a high incidence of prostate cancer when you take testosterone gel? And his doctor says, well, yeah. And he says, then why did you put me on it? He says, because you wanted me on it. He says, but you didn't tell me it was going to cause prostate cancer. And he says, hey, you want testosterone or do you want to be a wimpy male? And he says, I'm on testosterone and I've had prostate cancer. I just had my prostate taken out. That was what the doctor said. And my patient's like, he said, I wanted to slug the guy. And so they know, but they figure that the guys would rather have the testosterone and have the cancer than to not have a libido. And so they make that decision themselves. So it's important that people are educated. And a man may choose to take that risk. And to some degree they can do that if they support everything else like super, super well. But the better option is get the system working and get your testosterone levels back up again. Okay? So here's a guy that wrote, and he said, when I first came to see Dr. Carling, I had a low level of testosterone, had been dependent on synthetic testosterone for 10 to 12 years. I had not been sleeping well for 20 years. It took me a minimum of an hour to fall asleep, and then I would wake every 30 minutes tossing and turning. My thumbs ached so much that I couldn't even tie my boots. I compete in triathlons, and due to problems with my left knee, I hadn't been able to run for 5 to 6 years. My sinuses had been plugged up for 20 years. I was also experiencing a tremendous amount of fatigue. Now everything's so much better. My energy better is so high, so much higher. I feel a sense of calmness and no longer experiencing the mood swings I experienced before. I'm feeling good again like I used to feel 20 years ago. I can now zip through the day and feel good enough to work out at the end of the day. I was very skeptical when I first came to see Dr. Carling. Now I would refer anybody to her. Feeding the body and supporting the system. That's what it's about. Let's get your system working better. And I know that some of you really want to do that. Some of you are really suffering with a lot of things. And we have started doing something here at the office that we haven't done before. And what we've decided to do is, if you're at a point that you really feel like you want to start treatment and get off from hormone replacement and get your hormones balanced again, we've decided that we're going to start giving you a $75 break if you schedule for an appointment tonight. Then we're going to give you a break off the cost. The cost of doing that 27-point analysis, the time with me, the time for the report of findings where we go through everything, tell you the plan, is only $295. And so it'll be $225 instead. So does that calculate out right? I don't think so. 220, yeah. See, something's wrong with my math. 220.
Can you
Yeah.
schedule for your husband?
What's
Can
that?
I schedule for somebody else?
You can schedule for your husband, but make sure that he's okay with that, because I don't
Okay.
like that when they call and they go, I didn't want to be here, my wife wanted me to be here. So, yeah, you can. I mean, if you have agreement with your husband to do that. But, we are here to support you. And whether it's hormonal issues or anything else going on in your body, we are here to just help you through and make it as easy as possible. I don't like people doing it the cold turkey way because it's usually tough, but we're going to stand by you every step of the way to make sure you make it through it.
Is
Yeah.
that analysis nutritional too?
It is.
Like everything,
It's a-
vitamin D and all that stuff too?
Vitamin D, that would require a lab test. So some of the things we don't have a test, like I can do a test for B vitamins and know if your B vitamin is deficient, but if I want to test for B12, I have to do a lab test to do that.
Are you doing hair to see minerals? for
We
those?
don't do that on the initial, but if you need to, we will do that. Okay, so we have a lot of tests that we can do. And in fact, you can go on our website, which is vitalhealthcda.com, and we have a section on lab results, and it takes you to another company, and you can do any of the lab tests that's on that, plus there's other things that we can do with other companies. So there's a lot that we can do, yeah.
Do you use ZRT labs?
I have used them, and I mostly interpret them, but I use doctor's data usually.
Again, please?
It's called doctor's data as one of the
Doctor's data?
data, yeah. Okay, yes.
Just one quick question. Why would someone take vitamin D? You just mentioned that.
Because they're not getting outside enough. We shouldn't need to take vitamin D, but one of the problems is we don't eat enough fats. And if you don't eat enough fats, you can't absorb vitamin D.
I don't have that problem.
Okay, good.
I eat lots of fats.
If you eat lots of fats and you get out in the sunshine like you're supposed to on a regular basis, you don't need to take vitamin D.
Okay.
But, and people argue that we don't have enough sun.
Well, I just wondering, because my doctor asked me to, and I'm going, why?
Well,
She didn't give me an answer, so I just.
so 15 minutes a day of sun for 3 months gives you a 9-month supply.
Interesting.
So we should actually be able to make it through the winter without needing more, because our bodies store 9 months at a time.
Yeah.
So we just don't get outside and we don't have enough fats in our body.
My mom's 81 and she takes the estrogen because she needs all the stuff, but she thinks it helps her bone density, and she's osteoporotic, so that's why she stays on it, bone density. And so
They have now in studies showed that estrogen is wonderful bone sparing. However, doesn't work with bioidenticals or synthetics. Estrogen has no effect on your bones when it's given exogenously. It's only, that comes back to what we can use. It's not identical enough, and that is one thing that it falls short of. It does not help your bones when you take it from an exogenous source.
So I have a similar question. My mother-in-law moved in with us this 9 months ago, and she's 86, next couple days. She's been taking an estrogen and a progesterone. And I'm thinking, 86, do you really need this? So I probably shouldn't do this, but she hasn't seen her doctor in years, and it's just been, continuing, and so I'm just kind of tapering. She hasn't said anything.
Well, usually they do take you off by that point.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm
So,
thinking.
It's a many
I mean, the pharmacy sent them a note and said,
Yeah.
there's some medicines here you maybe should consider not being on, but.
yeah. Hey, sometimes your pharmacists are your best friends.
Yeah.
I mean, they really take a better look at things than your doctors do. I can't tell you to do that.
Yeah.
So,
I know you can't.
the qualifier here is, you gotta talk to the doctor. But typically they don't have women on that when they're in their 80s.
No.
So, especially when it doesn't work for bones. And they know that now. I mean, that came out almost 20 years ago. So,
And yet they still prescribe stuff like that.
yeah, but they don't tell you it's to spare your bones usually, because they know better. Unless they're just not educated and they're not keeping up with research. But most of them don't tell you that anymore, because they know it's not true. Okay, I'll hang around for a little while if you guys want to ask some more questions, but in the meantime, we have some handouts for you. We have 2 different packets. So there's one packet that that everybody gets, and then there's another packet, if you've already gotten one, it's the same thing as you've had before. So that's the one that has resources and how to tell the difference between a good vitamin and a bad vitamin, and talks about fats and some other things like that, right? Did I just steal your thunder?
No, you got it, girl.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay, so if you've not attended class before, raise your hand and Jen will give you hers.